So who are the holdouts? Who are the American companies or other companies around the world that are still refusing to sign on to this agreement? Well, the number one, Gap. Gap is the third largest retailer in the world, parent company of Old Navy, Gap, Banana Republic, and many other brands, and of course, a tremendous purchaser of clothing produced in Bangladesh. They had been in negotiations, as we heard last week from Garrett Strain, the United Students Against Sweatshops, with some of these sweatshop advocacy groups, with some labor groups on the ground for months, in fact for years, because they had been directly responsible, or rather, clothing companies that supplied them were companies where workers have been killed in the past. It's not yet clear whether they had clothing that was made in Rana Plaza, but they have an image. They bank on their image of being a socially responsible company. They are a tremendous purveyor of clothing from these developing countries. And of course, they were in these talks and scuttled these negotiations to go off on their own and do voluntary work. They've now said that they're willing to pledge $22 million in loans to these suppliers. But the fact of the matter is, these voluntary agreements have not worked in the past. And if you're not going to stand up now that the worst factory disaster in the world has occurred, now that it took 1,100 people getting killed in Bangladesh for the world to wake up to this travesty, to this tragedy, to this disaster that goes on halfway across the world, where the clothing we make is produced, for some companies to wake up, but apparently it's not good enough for Gap. It's also not good enough for Walmart. A little bit less of a shock, unfortunately, as Walmart has burnished a reputation as one of the least socially responsible companies in the world. We know that they pay their retail workers amongst the lowest wages of any retailer in the country. They drive wages down in the country overall because they are the largest single employer in the country. We know that the warehouse workers that supply the Walmarts across the country work in inhumane conditions, in temperatures over 100 degrees. We've covered that here on our show. We know that they face retaliation for speaking up about those conditions, for protesting them, for trying to organize into unions. We know that. We know that the retail workers themselves have faced retaliation for trying to organize into unions. And now we also know something else. Because in addition to the fact that Walmart is refusing to sign on to the binding agreement that 18 multinational corporations have signed on to, and I should say shamefully, only 2 of those corporations are American as of yet, and that's, again, unfortunately no surprise because of the corporate culture in America and the culture of accountability that exists in Europe vis-a-vis America. But now we know something else, which is that the Warehouse Workers United have revealed new documents. Again, this was a breaking story toward the end of the week, this week, that Walmart did, again, there were suppliers for Walmart in the Rana Plaza factory collapse. There was clothing made for Walmart in the factory collapse itself. Now, you may be wondering exactly how that occurs, but the Bangladesh Center for Worker Solidarity found that Fame jeans, which is a Walmart brand, were found in the rubble of the factory. That contradicts earlier denials by Walmart that they had any clothing that was made in the Rana Plaza factory collapse. Tremendous, amazing breaking stuff, and I should say that from anonymous sources within the United States labor movement, I know that I've spoken to personally that the United States labor movement has worked with activists on the ground in Bangladesh to help train them to identify brand labels within the rubble of factory collapses. This has been ongoing for months, long before the Bangladesh Rana Plaza factory collapse occurred, but obviously that effort has accelerated now in this movement for international worker solidarity. Tremendous stuff. Shame on you, Gap. Shame on you, Walmart. Go to gapdeathtraps.com. Sign on. Call your local Walmart. Call your local Gap. Tell them it's shameful. It's shameful that 2 of the largest retailers in the world that purchase millions and billions of dollars worth of clothing from Bangladesh, that create these fast turnaround times that local suppliers need to depend on, that puts pressure on these local suppliers, that makes it very hard for these local suppliers to operate and earn a profit without exploiting labor, without having poor safety standards, need to sign on now to a legally binding workplace and fire safety agreement that would do things like force these suppliers to put in fire escapes. It's not enough to do the voluntary efforts. We've seen that already.